Welcome to the very first meeting of the year of the East Multnomah County League of Women Voters. And as many of you know, I was a librarian with the public library system for 40 years. And I'm not going to say Multnomah County because in 1959, when I was hired, there was the Library Association of Portland, and the county contracted with the Library Association of Portland for library service, and it was not until 1990 that we actually became Multnomah County Library. And as you know, any organization that depends on library taxes for funding has good years and bad years. There are some years when whether you're the police department or whether you're a public school or whether you're a library, your budget gets cut and you have to cut back library hours or sometimes close branches altogether. Other times your funding is adequate, in fact sometimes ample, and suddenly you're able to build brand new branches. And we have been very fortunate that we have the new Fairview Library and the new Troutdale Library and the new Kenton Library and the new Northwest Branch. All of these things because we had adequate funding for library service. But anytime, again, if you're going to depend on taxes, you have to find out, you have to look at where your income's coming from, how much income you're going to have for the following year or 2 years or 3 years, whether you have a 3-year levy, a 5-year levy, whether you're funded in some other way. And of course, all this summer, there's been a great deal of talk about possibly the organization of a separate library service district. So to address these issues and talk about library funding, I want to present Becky Cobb, who's the Deputy Director of Multnomah County Library. Becky.
So it's really good to be here today to speak with you about the library and what's happening with library funding. First, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of what's happening right now with the library and our services and what's going on. And Sunny already told you about our new branches, and that was in my notes too, so that's great. And then I want to talk about the funding and then give you time to ask any questions that you may have. And Commissioner McKeel is here as well, and she's been very involved in this effort, so she's here to help answer any questions too and to give you her perspective on what's happening. You may or may not know this, but the Multnomah County Library is the oldest library west of the Mississippi. It's been around since 1864. It's been a publicly funded library since 1902. We now have Central Library and 18 neighborhood libraries spread throughout the county with a collection of just about 2 million items that make their way across the county every single day. And as Sunny said, we've been a department of Multnomah County since 1990. So not all that long, really, in the whole history of the library. The library is well used and well loved. We see that every year as our stats just keep going up. There's a public library data service report that we participate in that is a national report that public libraries report to. And with 2010 data, MCL checked out or renewed what we call circulated 22.7 million items that year, only surpassed by the New York Public Library, which obviously serves a much larger population. For the 9th year in a row, the library checked out and renewed more items than any other U.S. library serving fewer than 1 million residents. So when you compare MCL with libraries serving our size populations, we've been the #1 circulating library for 9 years in a row. So with the fiscal year that just ended on June 30th, the circ increased again to 23.9 million, or 32.3 items per person in Multnomah County checked out. So if you didn't get your 32, somebody else got them or got more. And that was a 5.4% increase over the year before. So it's just been this steady increase. In fact, over the last 10 years, circulation has increased 62%, and our staffing has increased 1%. So we've been working really hard to be very, very efficient. I don't know if any of you have been to your library recently and used a self-checkout station, but that has been one of our efforts to be able to maintain services with the staff that we have was to have you help us out a little bit and check out your own materials. Here's one highlight from a program that just ended at the end of the summer, and that is our summer reading program, which is partially funded by the Library Foundation. We just wrapped up the 99th year of that program, and more than 95,000 children participated throughout the county. It's very, very popular, assisted by more than 600 volunteers, many of whom are middle and high school students. So it's kind of their first little working experience too. We're looking forward to celebrating 100 years of summer reading next year. And I just want to read you one recent comment from a parent about that program. Our family has been a part of the summer reading program since 2000, the year of my son's birth. It has been immeasurably helpful, contributing to the amazing development of my son's ability to read as well as his love of reading. Starting his 11th year with the program, he is now qualified and participating as a volunteer and continues to use the library regularly, checking out books as well as participating in the Reading to the Dogs program. Much of the library involvement is because of the inviting and fun summer reading program. Thank you so much, and we will continue to use this valuable resource as long as possible. So that program really has an impact on kids' lives. All of this activity is taking place in East County as well. As Sunny mentioned, the county opened 4 new libraries in the last decade, and 2 of those are here in East County. Fairview, Columbia opened in 2001, and Troutdale in 2010. Yay, finally. Along with Gresham and Rockwood, these 4 East County libraries checked out 1.5 million items last year and had over 830,000 in-person visits, so they're very busy libraries. We're working really hard to continue to be responsive to community needs, using new technology when it seems appropriate, yet also recognizing that not everybody's up to speed yet, and so we need to still provide those basic library services. Some of the new things that we're offering are ebooks, downloadable music, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week text-to-librarian service, a new mobile application for smartphones that just came out recently, yet we still provide story times, services for new immigrants, support for teachers, parents, and child care providers, and outreach services for seniors, just to mention a few of the programs. So that's just a little snapshot of what's happening in the library world. How is this all funded? That's the important question that we're looking at right now. The library's current budget is about $63 million. There are 2 main funding sources for that. One is the library levy, the other is a general fund allocation from the county. The library levy is a 5-year local option levy. It was last approved by the voters in 2006, and we are now in the 5th and final year of that levy. So it is funding this year through June 30th of 2012. That money is dedicated to the library, and it provides about 2/3 of our funding. So it's a very big chunk. The general fund is an annual allocation by the Board of County Commissioners that happens during the annual budget process, and that's about 1/4 of our funding. The rest of our funding comes from non-tax revenues, things like your library fines, if you pay those, other fees, grants, interest, that kind of thing. I need to start out by saying there is no perfect solution for library funding, and people have been looking for a very long time for a better solution, because there are 2 issues with the current model. The first is that the levy, obviously, since it has to be renewed every 5 years, is a temporary tax. So when you're counting on 2/3 of your funding from something that is essentially temporary, that's not a real conducive method to be able to plan into the future and to really be able to count on library services. So that's the first issue with that. The second issue is that it is subject to property tax compression. Now, I'm not going to go into the details on that because it will bore you all silly. But let me just say that compression comes from 2 property tax limitation measures that were passed by voters in the 1990s, and local option levies are the first revenues that are impacted if a property comes into compression and the tax needs to be reduced. So the levy kind of sits at the top. And so we have to set a levy rate that accounts for that loss of property taxes due to compression. The interesting thing about compression is that it can be pretty volatile in how much it is and what the range is. For example, during this current 5-year levy, compression has ranged from a low of 13% in the early years to what we think will be about 30% this year. So the levy instantly then loses money. So we're actually bringing in less money this year from the levy than we did in the early years. So that, of course, has an impact on how we can plan and continue services into the future. The issue with the general fund, the other major source of funding, is that it is an annual allocation. And we kind of have to know what that is when we try and set a levy rate for a 5-year period. But of course, every year it's subject to the budget process and it can change. And as you all know, I'm sure, the county is facing many competing demands for those limited and shrinking general fund dollars. So that's, the library's part of that. And so that amount can change every year depending on what else is going on for the county budgetarily. So those are the two issues around our funding right now. For many years, the library was totally funded by general fund dollars, or almost totally. When it first became a public library in 1902, and then clear into about the early 1970s, and that's when the general fund really started to have some impacts. And so the library began using serial levies. Now back then they were 3-year levies, and they were a much smaller part of the library's overall funding. Over the years, as there have been more demands on the general fund and we've increased the levy rate, that whole proportion has shifted. So the general fund that was 47% of the library's funding in 98, 99 is now only about a quarter, and the levy rate has increased 50% in the same time period. So the levy has really become the large chunk of our funding. And again, it's temporary. So that's the issue that we're trying to deal with. Library supporters have long recognized the need for a different funding model. And there's been a lot of work done over the years. Some of that I've gotten to be involved in. There have been several studies about, are there other tax mechanisms that would work better? There have been a couple of major efforts that did take place. The first was a library district effort way back in the late 1980s. And that was a method that had to be approved by every city council within the county. A couple of the cities did approve it, and then it came before the city of Portland, and they did not vote in favor, and so that stopped about a 2-year effort in its tracks. The second effort was in the early 1990s when the Library Advisory Board put forth a utility tax, thinking, okay, let's try something totally different that's not a property tax. And they got a little ways with the Board of County Commissioners, but then that effort was halted when there was a transition in the board and some new members came on who said, we're not going to support that utility tax. So that effort stopped as well. More recently, former Chair Wheeler commissioned a citizen-led library funding task force. That group met 14 times during 2007-08, and they ended up recommending the formation of a library district, so we came back to that idea, through an amendment to the county's home rule charter. And then you may know this, that because the county has a home rule charter, part of what's mandated in that charter is that every 6 years there's a charter review committee that looks at the charter and puts forth anything they think needs to be changed to the voters. And so that charter review committee took up in 2009 and 10, and Commissioner McKeel actually went before them and asked the committee to look at this recommendation for a library district through a charter amendment and put it forward to the voters. Now, if you all voted in November of 2010, you would have seen that charter amendment measure. It was on the ballot, and it was passed by about a 72% approval rating. So it seemed that there's very strong support for that whole idea of a library district. That, of course, was only the idea of it. It did not have a rate or a district formation attached to it. That's what we're looking at right now. And I just need to let you know that library districts are very common throughout Oregon and throughout the country. In fact, there are currently 25 in the state of Oregon. Most recently, Clackamas County passed a library district in 2008. Now, they're a very different setup than what we are because they have independent city libraries as well. But Hood River County also passed a district measure in 2010. And that, of course, was a library that had to be closed for a year because their county board said, we don't have any more money to fund the library. You need to get it from the voters. And they were finally successful and just reopened a few months ago. So the advantage of a district as we see it is that it establishes a single stable source of funding for the library. It would replace both the local option levy and the general fund allocation. So we would not be in that tug of war with the rest of the county departments anymore. We would not be in this levy cycle where we're having to keep going back out all the time. It's more predictable. It allows for better long-range planning, and the experience is much less compression because you know the levees sit on the top. A district would actually be much lower in the hierarchy of what gets compressed. So those are the advantages in a district for us. Right now, we were hoping there'd be a measure on the November ballot. The county chair chose not to do that, and so we are, due to the economic circumstances that we all find ourselves in right now and just kind of the general voter mood. And so remember when I said at the beginning this levy expires in June 2012? That means we have to have a money measure on the May ballot. And that money measure needs to pass, or come July 1st, we're going to experience a very different library. So we're hoping that a district measure will be referred sometime soon. The board does have until March 6th to actually make that referral, but that's what we're waiting on at the moment.
Thank you. I am Multnomah County Commissioner Diane McKeel, and I represent East County. And I have a little laryngitis today, so lucky you, I can't talk very long. But I do want to share a little about my background with the library. Actually, before I was elected to the county commission, I served on the library advisory board. So I've done a lot of work with the libraries and also a lot of work around the formation of the district, because this isn't a new idea, as Becky said. It's something that the library boards have been looking at. So once I was elected, then I was appointed to be the commission liaison to the library advisory board. So I went in, I didn't miss a meeting. I went in December as a library advisory board member, and in January as the commissioner liaison to the library advisory board. So I have well, the library's been established a long time. I was going to say I have a long history with the library, but I don't really in the in the context of things, but some number of years in that. And I just wanted to share a couple of things about the library with you that that I love. And first is our volunteers that work in our libraries. There were over 70,000 hours of time in library volunteer hours last year, and that's incredible. I mean, when we look at our libraries and the people that want to volunteer to work in our libraries, as Becky said, our libraries are beloved in our community, and people really, really care about the libraries and want to help in any way that they can. I think as you look at our libraries too, we offer something for everybody. We start with childhood, with birth actually, and we provide for parents, students, people looking for work, and people learning English, and certainly our senior citizens. There's something for everyone at the library, and our services are free and they're open to all, and that's very, very important for communities. I'll just speak a little about the district versus levy that Becky spoke about earlier. As she said, our Charter Review Committee did send to the ballot. When the Charter Review Committee meets, as Becky said, they're required to meet every 6 years to do charter review and look what's in the charter. They have the ability to go straight to the ballot with whatever they decide is appropriate from the charter. They don't have to come through the county commissioners to do that. They do come before us, and they did, and we certainly approved what they were forwarding, but they don't really have to do that. So anyway, they approved sending forward to the voters the ballot measure that would allow us as county commissioners to establish a library district. And that's what you voted on in November, was the for us to be able to go forward with a district. So as Becky mentioned, the chair chose not to go forward in November, so now we're looking at May, and we will have either a levy or a district on the ballot in May. I personally hope we have a district on the ballot in May, because in my way of thinking, it's stable funding for the libraries. It's, as analysis is being done now, it looks like the rate for the levy or the district are going to be very comparable. So in my mind, it's time to move forward with the district. A lot of work has been done on this. It's very stable funding for our libraries. It takes away, as Becky said, that every 5 years of going back out with the levy, and so it allows the libraries to do a lot more long-range planning. And as I said, we provide services for everybody in the county, and it's free to everybody in the county. So it's very important that we are able to do that. So I will stop there, I think. And so if you have questions for Becky and I, we can answer those questions.
Questions? I have some questions. The Library Foundation, the Tidal Wave Bookstore, the Friends of the Library, how do each of those affect library funding? What do they add to the basic library?
Let me start with the Tidal Wave Bookstore. That is our, I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but that is where we do the ultimate recycling, in that we sell our discarded materials that we can no longer need or fit into our buildings. And it is open 6 days a week from 10 to 4, Monday through Saturday, over by the Library Administration Building in Northeast Portland. So if you've never been there, you need to come check it out. The prices are very reasonable. And that generates about $200,000 in revenue a year, or a little more, that comes right back into the library's operating budget. We have one paid staff person working at that store, the rest is staffed by volunteers. So that's the Tidal Wave and the impact that it has. The Friends of the Library actually began in 1972 in response to the budget cuts that the library was experiencing at that time. And they are what we would consider a grassroots advocacy group. They contribute funding for programs and other needs that the library has throughout the year. And they also are really good about just getting people out, volunteers out for elections. And they have contributed to the last 10 elections that the library has had since those early 70s. One of the main program that they fund for us is the Page Turner program, which is the book group program that is in every single library throughout the county. And we probably get $50,000 to $75,000 a year in direct program support from the Friends. Plus they contribute to the campaigns for the levy and for whatever other measure we may have, such as the charter amendment. The foundation was formed in 1995 when Central Library was being renovated, and that was the first big effort that they helped enhance when Central Library was being completed. And since then, they have done much more in program funding and support for us. As I mentioned, they help with summer reading. They contribute in the neighborhood of usually $800,000 to $1 million a year in direct cash plus additional in-kind support to the library. But their role is to enhance library programs, not to supplant taxpayer funding. And they're very clear that that is their mission. They have also in recent years begun to support the campaigns as well. So they are making substantial donations to the PAC for the levy campaigns. And that is a newer thing for them, but they have done that now for the last 2 campaigns, and then they will be for this next one.
What is the problem with having districts? Why are some of the commissioners not for it, or why did the Portland people vote it down?
I think historically what happened in 1987 was there was a hope then that there would be a regional library district with Clackamas and Washington counties, and so I think it was particularly Commissioner Blumenauer that was pushing for that effort, and so that is what stopped it then. That's a really difficult thing to do when the other counties are not full county systems like Multnomah County is. They're independent city libraries, and then some are county funded, and it's kind of a mix. Because everyone likes to have their library, and we totally get that, you know, and control of their particular library, and so that's part of the issue there. I think the district, you know, we have enjoyed very good support of the levies, and that has been a very good funding mechanism for us. It's been good for really at a very high level for about 15 years now, because in '97 we passed a bigger levy than normal, than we had ever had before, and that's when it really shifted to the levy becoming the majority of our funding. So it's been in some ways, a very stable source of funding, but as the rate keeps having to go up, each time we go back out, largely now because of compression, less general fund money, increased costs, it makes it more and more, I think, vulnerable to not passing. And then we have a major issue when you all of a sudden don't have 2/3 of your funding. I think the district, because we haven't done it here in the county, seems to be kind of a new thing, and that's always a little harder for people to wrap their minds around. But it is certainly not a new concept, and something that is working very successfully in other places. The issue with a district that is different than a levy you do get to change that rate every 5 years. A district, you go out to form a district and you adopt a rate, and that rate, given Oregon property tax law, is permanent from here on out. So we have to live within that rate for at least a good period of time.
And I think if I may speak for the commission, I think the other commissioners they're doing that kind of an analysis that Becky was just talking about, which is the path to go. Because I have the history with the library, it's easy for me to see, but that's what they're doing, is kind of doing that analysis. And we're hoping that vote is going to come very soon, and I think it will certainly come by January if it doesn't come before that. So.
And if people were wanting to lobby for or against it, what would they do?
They could contact the commissioners, you bet.
Just contact them.
And we do anticipate that there will be a public hearing as part of that process.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can also contact any of us at any time and let us know how you feel about things, what your thinking is. So we appreciate that input.
Yes.
Are the libraries that are in community colleges in any of
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and answer your question. I thought you were asking if they were county libraries.
if they are included in any of that, or if that's strictly the community colleges money that I've worked at long enough to
Right. Yeah.
their library quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. They're a different funding. They're not part of the county library. County library.
I just wanted to say that I absolutely adore the Gresham Library, and especially the story times, Natalie at the story times. I really want to give her a cheer because in your eyes, because she is just fantastic.
Oh, good, thank you.
So,
Good to hear. Yes.
Do you still accept books for resale at the tidal wave? And if so, what is the process?
Actually, we accept books for the Friends of the Library. That's where donated books go, is to the Friends, because they hold 2 book sales a year. And one is here in East County in the spring, and then the big one is coming up in October, late October in the fall. And those are their 2 big fundraising efforts. So donated books can either be, if you only have a bag or 2, they can go to your local library, and our drivers will pick them up as part of when they're on their delivery routes. Or if you have more than that, we would ask you to come or have someone come to the library administration building, and we'll take care of them there, because they do their book sorting actually in the basement of our building. So, yes.
Yeah, I have a question on compression, a couple questions.
Oh, good. We love compression questions.
I know. You have the best here to explain it.
I guess, I don't know which is first.
Okay.
But number one, now, why is it so volatile right now? And I don't understand any of it really, compression, I don't. But would it still stay into effect somewhat under a district?
Okay. Compression is volatile because it is a property by property analysis, and it's based on the difference between your assessed value and your real market value. And each of the property tax limitation measures that passed in the 90s, one affected the assessed value and one affected the real market value. And I won't go into more detail unless you want to hear it, and then we'll just do it, you and me. But it's when the gap between your assessed value, which is growing at 3% a year, and your real market value begins to narrow, then compression occurs. So it's gone up in this levy cycle because the real market value is coming down, and has been over the last couple of years. And nobody really anticipated the economic turndown that we've had in this 5-year period. And so actually in the first couple of years, the levy brought in more than what was projected because compression was low, because real market values were high. And then as the real market values have started to come down, we've really seen the impact of that, because more properties have moved into that.
My daughter bought her house in 2008, and now the real market value is lower. than the assessed value. I mean, it hasn't just come
Yeah.
down to the assessed value, it's gone below it. You know?
So her property could potentially be in compression, and what that means is Measure 5, which passed in 1990, said that any local government can only levy $10 per 1,000 of assessed value. So when that, no, was that right? Did I say that right? Assessed value, real market, oh jeez, this is where I get confused and I don't have my notes. Sorry. Anyway, you can only be paying $10 per 1,000 on local government, and if you get above that, then it's going to come down to be compressed at $10.
It's
Sean,
the
correct
lesser,
me.
it's the lesser of the two.
Right,
And then
Oh.
also compression is not as big a factor in this part of the county. It's-
right.
It's more.
It's mostly within the
predominant
city of
in other
Portland.
parts Of the county.
Oh, is that because of the tax structure?
They've just approved more tax measures in the city,
And because values climbed higher,
in the city, yeah.
some faster.
And when, no.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very complex, and it is a property by property calculation, so you can't even make any blanket statements about it because it's different within the city of Portland, and then out here it is different as well. So there you have it.
At one time, the library budget, the total library budget, staffing, personnel, cost about 80% of the budget. And then the book budget was maybe 5% of the budget or something like that. Is that still true today, or
No.
has that changed?
It has changed. The personnel now this year is about 63% of the budget. The books and materials budget is about 11%, so we have been able to really improve that over the years, which is great because then people find what they want when they go into the library, or at least they know they can get it from another library and have it shipped to them. We are paying about another 17% to the county for a variety of services. Most of that is for IT support and for our facilities, and especially when you add more facilities, then you need more people to help take care of them. Another 6% is for materials, supplies, and capital, just kind of everything else, and then about another 3% for contracts. So the majority is still for personnel, but the overall percentage has dropped down. Any other questions? Well, you'll be hearing more about this, I'm sure, into the future, and so stay tuned. And we will be on the ballot in May with something, so hopefully we can come back.
The public meeting that you're talking about, where will we find that?
I'm sure we'll post it on our website. I'm sure it will also be on the
my
county's
website.
website.
Website is
multcolib.org. And we will definitely try and get that word out widely.
There are also some library material on that front table in case you'd like to browse and pick something up. And we wish to thank both of you for
Thank
coming
you.
and presenting your material.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.